Hey, boys and girls, welcome to the UFC 222 breakdown, which is going to be headlined by Cyborg and Kunitskaya. Co-headliner is going to be a fight between number 2 ranked Frankie Edgar and number 3 ranked Brian Ortega. Hell of a card up and down. But let's talk about the fights that happened this past weekend, where if you watch the episode that I did atrocious picking. I only got 1 out of the 5 right, and we saw Brian Kelleher beat Renan Barão. Max Griffin really outworked Perry in a pretty lopsided fight. Latifi knocked out OSP in a fight that I thought OSP would not only win, but if Latifi was able to pull it off, I thought he would have to rely on his wrestling, and that wasn't the case at all. I mean, he just knocked him the fuck out. Andrade, I kind of got right. Like, Torres wasn't able to keep up with their pace, and Andrade was able to implement her game plan. And then Stevens obviously knocked out Josh Emmett in a fight where I thought going into it, Emmett would be able to get away. He would be able to get out of some of the exchanges a little bit cleaner. That wasn't the case at all. It was Stevens who was doing that, and you could tell that it was disrupting the timing and confidence of Emmett early on. That's a fight that didn't end without a little bit of controversy, though, right? I think you had Stevens land 2 elbows to the back of Emmett's head, and then a knee that was illegal as well. And the debate is like, you see people talking, and they're like, well, the knee barely landed, and it only landed on the way back down, and did it really impact the outcome of the fight? And I think the answer is we don't know. Like, you don't know if it impacted the outcome of the fight. For me, it's not so much about whether it did damage. It's that the intent was there. And the fact that you're introducing a concept to Emmett, the fighter on the ground in this case, that shouldn't be introduced to him. Like, he should not have to defend himself against illegal blows. And, I mean, if you look at other things in the sport, right, like ball kicks, poking someone in the eye, you get breaks for those, right? And it's weird that just because Stevens rocked him and put him on the ground, that we're like, he can throw some illegal blows now. Like, how the fuck does that make any sense at all? Like, in what world does that make sense? So you do something right, so now you're allowed to do something wrong? I don't get that. I don't get how you don't stand that back up. I'm not blaming the ref, though, because MMA is a very subjective sport. There aren't clear guidelines like there are in other sports, right? Like in football, you have a clear definition of what a hold is. I mean, the catching thing is all kind of fucked up right now, right? But like, if someone grabs your jersey when you run the route, they're going to throw a defensive holding call. Like, that's a very cut and dry, like, definition of the rule, and it's not like that in MMA. And it's hard to make rules in MMA because every fight that plays out is so unique, and the littlest moment can impact the outcome of the entire fight. Like in that instance, Stevens landed a very nice, clean left hook that put Emmett down, and you don't want to take away the advantage that he just gained and earned because he fucked up, but at the same time, he did fuck up. Like, you don't get to reward someone with, like, the ability to pull off illegal maneuvers just because they did something well in the fight. That's my take on it. I mean, obviously, too, when you're the ref and you're in the heat of the moment, like, that's a judgment call, and it's a tough one to make. I mean, who knows how many people watching you, right? Like, you're on TV, you got the crowd around you. Like, he's in a really tough spot there. But to me, the most important thing is that, like, when you're talking about this, it's not about, like, the damage. To me, it's the intent and the fact that you're forcing a guy who is on the ground, clearly rocked, trying to get, like, back to his feet. And if you talk to a lot of guys who get rocked like that, they say they go into autopilot mode, right? And, like, the training that they've done in the gym and everything just starts to kind of, like, carry them. Like, they're running on instinct almost. Like, they know what to do. But what they don't know how to do is defend illegal tactics, because you don't drill that. Why would you drill something that you're not going to get hit with, or you're not supposed to get hit with in the octagon? To me, there's an argument there that is more significant than, like, a ball kick or an eye poke. You know what I mean? Like, you're talking about a guy on the ground who is having trouble figuring out what the hell's going on, and then you got the guy on top of him who starts throwing illegal blows at him, who he's already not equipped to prepare for, or, like, equipped to defend, rather, and now you're asking him to do that while he's rocked? That's weird to me. But anyway, I mean, I think Stevens probably would have won the fight anyway, but at the same time, I don't think that you should be able to just, like, start doing whatever the fuck you want just because you landed a nice left hook that put a guy on the mat. Like, that doesn't mean I can start stomping on your face or some shit, you know what I mean? I don't know. To me, it's the intent that matters, and, like, they're told beforehand. I mean, listen to John Anik, the fighters have been informed of the rule set before the card starts. See, it's Stevens' responsibility to understand the rules and use his weapons within the guidelines of those rules, right? And I don't think he did that. And I don't think, I mean, yeah, he got Emmett down and put him in a bad way, but Jesus, I mean, can't knee someone when they're down like that. I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about Jon Jones a little bit. CSAC, CSAC, California State Athletic Commission, whatever the fuck you want to call it. It looks like they're going to hand him a $200,000 some fine and revoke his fighting license. And from what I'm reading, could be for up to 4 years. Apparently he went in with the defense and was just kind of like, yeah, you know, I can't provide you with the supplement that was tainted, but I can tell you this, I wouldn't do that. Like, what panel is gonna listen to you say that and be like, yeah, you know, he wouldn't do that. Like, right? Like, looking at his history, like, got a guy hit a pregnant lady with his car, in trouble for cocaine, announced on stage that he beat Daniel Cormier after a weekend of cocaine. We're going to take his word on this one that he wouldn't knowingly do this. I mean, what kind of fucking defense is that? And it's not going to fly, and it didn't fly. And we'll see how things continue to play out and how long he'll actually be out for. But, I mean, I hate to call Jon Jones a disappointment because he did give the sport of MMA so much, right? But I really think this. I really believe this. I think Jon is the most disappointing figure in sports history as far as what he was capable of doing. And you got to see, because with a lot of guys, right, who like busted in other sports and stuff because they had problems off the field and blah, 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 you saw the ceiling for them. The difference with Jon, though, is that you got to see him like bust through that ceiling and keep going. I mean, he lost a fight due to a stupid rule, but he beat Daniel Cormier twice. Like, he's beat guys like Dan Henderson, Lyoto Machida, Vitor Belfort after surviving that armbar where you know his arm was just hyperextended. I really think, I don't want to call him a waste of talent either because he got to exercise some of that talent, but he really is, to me, like the biggest disappointment in all sports history. There's no one that I can think of that has been as good as Jones was in his sport that has fucked up as much as he had like this. You know what I mean? And it's not like Jones is like a high-level guy. He is the high-level guy. Like, he is the elite of the elite. We're not, like, you got guys like, okay, like, for example, like, to get to a title, to hold a title in the UFC, you have to be extremely elite. Like, you have to be better than everyone in your weight class, right? Jon not only did that, but did it for years and beat guys like Daniel Cormier, who is probably the second best light heavyweight ever. He's just that far above everyone. Like, he is arguably the greatest fighter of all time, and he keeps fucking up, and you don't get to see him fight in the octagon. Like, it's a huge disappointment. There are things that he's able to do that guys just can't do. And, I mean, the execution of his game plans once he gets in there, and the way he was digging the body of DC before he set up that head kick, and, oh, man, I think, when I watch him, I think he's the greatest fighter ever. I really do. I mean, looking at the level of competition that he's faced, his ability to just like take guys into their world and beat them up at what they're good at. Like, he's a unique talent, and I don't think we've ever seen anyone as good as he is in their sport fall like this, right? Like, and it's a mess, really. And I kind of feel bad for the guy, but at the same time, it's his own doing. It's just like, sucks for fans, though. Anyway, let's talk about the fight card coming up this weekend. Kicking things off on the main card is going to be number 6 ranked Kat Zingano versus Ketlin Vieira, who's 9-0 right now, ranked number 5. Coming off a nice win over Sarah McMahon, where she caught her in an arm triangle in the second round. She's got a very active guard when she goes to the ground, and she was facing some trouble. She got put in some spots where she had to, you know, when Sarah McMahon gets on top of you, it's no joke, and she was forced to face some adversity in that sense. McMahon had her mounted at one point, and she was able to buck her off and put her in a leg lock position. She didn't finish, obviously, but showed some ability to escape some tough situations. I like that a lot. And she's on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC. She's 9-0, so obviously she's on a 9-fight win streak overall, right? But before that, she picked up a unanimous decision win over Ashley Evans-Smith, and she's really good. In that fight, she demonstrated that she got some really good counters. You know what I mean? Like, very patient, waiting on you to throw and then making you pay for throwing. Before that, in her UFC debut, she picked up a split decision win over Kelly Fasholz in a fight that I thought she won. But I'm not a goddamn judge, and we've done enough bitching about all the rules and bullshit today, so leave it at that. 6 of her 9 wins have been finishes, and she's got 4 submissions sprinkled in there. Obviously 2 knockouts if there's, 6 out of 9 are finishes. Very talented, and a lot of hype around this girl coming up. This is bantamweight, by the way, in the women's division, 135. But she's fighting Kat Zingano, who earlier in her UFC career was thought that was going to be the girl that was going to dethrone Ronda Rousey, right? Like, everyone's talking about it. Like, this might be the girl to do it, finally. And she knocked out Amanda Nunes in the 3rd round at UFC 178. Went through some trouble. I mean, Amanda Nunes is a killer, so to get a knockout over her. And she survived the pretty vicious 1st round from Amanda, and then came back and was able to get out in the 3rd, lay some ground and pound down, and secure the win. But, yeah, and obviously Nunes ended up knocking out Ronda, right? So, but it's not that Kat didn't get her opportunity to fight Ronda. She fought Ronda Rousey at 184 and got armbarred in like 20 seconds or something because she just stormed her, right? And then sprinting at someone with a background in judo like Ronda Rousey had, it's probably not your best idea. You're probably going to get flipped on your fucking head, and that's what happened. And she got armbarred. And it makes you wonder, though, like, after that win over Nunes, like, what would have happened if she would have just calmed down and tried to pick Ronda apart? Like, would we have seen Ronda fall off the heap a little bit sooner? I don't know. And then at UFC 200, she fought Juliana Pena in a fight that she got kind of dominated in. Like, she looked good at moments, but for the most part wasn't able to get back to her feet when Pena had her on the ground, and just Pena kind of had her way with her. The problem with Zingano is I think she's injury prone. She might have some personal shit going on. I don't know all the details, but she doesn't fight very often. Her last 3 fights, her most recent one was in 2016, so almost 2 years ago at UFC 200. Before that, February 28, 2015. And before that, September 27th of 2014. So that's not too bad. September to February. That's not terrible, but this 2-year layoff most recently bothers me. For that reason, I'm going to take Ketlen Vieira. I just like the way she counters, and I like how active she is on the ground. I think she's going to give Kat a lot of trouble, even if Kat can manage to get her to the ground. Like, she's pretty dangerous off her back, as she showed us in the McMahon fight. But for me, it's ring rust. I mean, guys like Dominic Cruz come back and beat TJ Dillashaw, right? And they're like, oh, ring rust isn't real. But for most people, it is real. There's a speed and like an energy that's happening in the octagon that when you've been away for a while, you got to get reintroduced to it, I think, for most people at least. And I think Zingano's just going to be a little bit slow to the punch on some of the things that Vieira's throwing at her. Or Vieira's kind of a counter fighter, right? So I think that she's going to open herself up to some counters when she starts throwing combos at Vieira. Maybe not, though. Maybe Zingano's improved. Like, maybe sometimes the time off helps people, but in this instance, I'm going to take Vieira. And I'm going to take her by a unanimous decision. I guess it doesn't matter, unanimous or split, right? I just think it'll go 3 rounds. And I think she'll be able to pick up a win. Next up, we're going to have Stefan Struve fighting Andrei Arlovski. Struve is currently ranked number 10. He's got a lot of fights, man. I didn't realize he had this many. He's 28-9 overall. And Arlovski is 26-15, so no shortage of experience for this fight here, right? A lot of time spent in the ring or octagon, whatever fucking cage they fought in, right? Because Arlovski's guy's been around for forever. He's fighting in... Did he fight in Pride? I think he went to Strikeforce for a little bit. Point is, a lot of time spent fighting in MMA, right? That's the point I'm getting at. Struve is most recently coming off a loss to Alexander Volkov in a fight that him and Volkov headlined in September of 2017. Pretty back and forth fight. Like, they both had their moments. No one was really taking control of the fight until late in the 3rd round later in the 3rd round when Volkov really started to get things together. And when Struve gets knocked out, he's like, what, 6'11 and a half, I think they list him at. He's basically 7 feet, and when he gets knocked out, he just, like, collapses. It looks like a skyscraper falling out of the fucking sky, you know what I mean? Don't bring that shit up around Eddie Bravo. Goddamn conspiracy theorist. Before that, though, Struve picked up a win over Daniel Omielanchuk. A little bit of... everybody looks short compared to Struve, though, right? So one thing that he does struggle with is when people kind of storm him and get inside on him, and I think that's what Arlovski's going to have to do. We also three most recent fights for Struve were Volkov, Omi Lanchuk, and Antonio Silva, who he knocked out within like seconds. So I didn't want to spend a ton of time talking about that. But I'll just throw it out there so you guys have it to stick in your back pocket. Know that he fucked up Silva in the first round. But for Arlovsky, the key is going to be getting in there close. I think mixing it up, going to the body, and then going up top. You got to get inside of those punches that Struve's throwing at you, because he is long. He's going to have the reach advantage on almost everybody that he fights. But Arlovsky just most recently picked up a win over Junior Albini. Unanimous decision at UFC Fight Night, Poirier versus Pettis, I think it was. Yeah, Poirier versus Pettis in November. Before that, though, he was on like a 4 or 5 fight losing streak. I mean, really going through a rough patch. And he was an underdog heading into the Albini fight and looked really good. I mean, I don't know how much of that was him being a vet and Albini being an up-and-comer, but Arlovsky also moved to American Top Team, and sometimes changing camps is a desperation move and it doesn't work out, but sometimes it does, and it really does. Like, I thought Arlovsky looked improved, and I don't think it was just because he was fighting a newcomer. I thought that he looked more patient with the strikes and stuff, and I think that if he fights that way against Stefan Struve, it's going to let him pick up the win. Obviously, like I said, Arlovsky's been struggling lately up until the Albini fight. Right before that, he dropped the unanimous decision Marcin Tybura, who's no joke, though. I mean, Tybura's good. And then he got knocked out in the first round before that by Francis Ngannou. But, I mean, who the fuck wasn't Francis Ngannou knocking out until he fought Stipe, you know? So, I mean, obviously it's never good to get on a skid like that, but he just ran into some motherfuckers at heavyweight and before being able to get back on his feet against Albini. I'm taking Arlovsky, though. I like him in this fight, and it's always so hard to predict heavyweight fights because when they land, man, it's hard to tell what's going to happen, right? Like, they can have one punch that ends the fight, and Struve could definitely land that. I just think Arlovsky's going to fight a smart fight. I like the fact that he moved to American Top Team. I thought he looked good in his last fight. I think he'll be able to get inside the reach of Struve, bust the body up, and go to the head. I'm taking second round knockout in this one. But wouldn't be surprised if Struve was able to pull out the win. You know, anything can happen when heavyweights start throwing their hands around. So doing a lot of guesswork when you try to pick a fight like this. Be silly to pretend that you're not. Next is a kid who has a ton of hype around him right now. He's on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, and Sean O'Malley. 9-0. I think he's got 6 knockouts, a submission. The other 2 are decisions, I believe. I might have that mixed up, but I know he's got quite a few knockouts, and it's impressive because he's fighting at bantamweight. Most recently, he had his UFC debut against Tyrion Ware, and a pretty tough fight for him. Like, it wasn't a cakewalk, you know. He had to go through some adversity in that, but he looked good. He had that very impressive knockout in the Contender Series against Alfred Kazakayan, I think is how you pronounce his last name. That was back in July. And he's a bit wild. Like, he was a bit crazy in that fight. He's crazy in general. He was crazy in his UFC debut, too, like the way he throws the strikes. But especially so in the Contender Series, because you're trying to make a name for yourself. Dana White's there. You want your contract. You want your shot. Paid off for him. He picked up the knockout there in the first round. And before that, he had a knockout in the first round over David Nuzzo in Legacy Fighting Alliance. And it was a spinning back kick, I think. So O'Malley's a guy who moves a lot. He's very active, and he's very unorthodox, and he's always switching stances. And one of the things he does, this is my favorite thing that he does. Usually, there are traditional combos that people throw at each other, right? Like, you might go in and you guys engage in something, and then you break, and then there's a slight break in the action, right? O'Malley attacks during those breaks in action. I don't really know how to explain it. I'm not a striking savvy guy, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know all the shit that I'm talking about, but if you get to watch him this weekend, pay attention to that. There will be moments where you're like, all right, they're going to reset and like start sizing each other up again. Moments where you think that's going to happen, O'Malley's throwing strikes at you and making you think about that. Sometimes it opens him up to counters and he drops his hands a little bit, but he's very unorthodox and very creative in his setups, and it's working for him so far. If he can just clean a few things up, he's a very promising prospect. He's young too. He's got to be like 23. I think he was born in 94. He's 23 or 24 years old, so, I mean, 9-0, already fighting your second UFC fight. Got a pretty promising road ahead of you. And he's fighting Andre Sukumta, who Most recently picked up a win over Luke Sanders, second round TKO. And that was a big win for him because he was an underdog in that fight. Sanders was like 11-1. And before that, Sukumta dropped 2 very close split decisions. One thing that I don't like about Sukumta is he lets people put pressure on him, and I think O'Malley's going to be able to do that, especially in the first round. Sukumta demonstrated that he has knockout power, but I just think that the way that O'Malley's switching stances, his movement, I think it's going to be very hard for Sukumta to keep up with. I'm going with O'Malley, third round KO. Sukumta's a guy who he's going to hang out in the orthodox stance almost the whole time, and I think that you're going to see a lot of dancing. And he's not a guy, like, if you look at O'Malley in some of his most recent fights, he struggles when guys, like, blitz him, kind of, or put him up against the cage, and he does a good job getting back to where he needs to, but in those brief moments where he's being pressured, he kind of struggles there a little bit, like, that's where some shots are getting landed on him. And Sukumta is not exactly a pressure fighter. Maybe you'll see him do that in this fight a little more, but I don't see it, and I think that O'Malley, his footwork and everything is just going to be a little bit too much for him to handle. If O'Malley doesn't win decision, I like him to knock him out in the third. Sukumta can pull it off, though. I mean, anyone could win any fight any given day, right? Like, these guys are in the UFC for a goddamn reason. Yeah, let's make it official. O'Malley, third round KO. That's my pick. All right, now we get to move on to the co-headliner between Frankie Edgar and Brian Ortega. And Ortega has been on a tear lately. And Ortega's one of those guys who is a jiu-jitsu wizard, and it's effective for MMA. Like, he's developed a method that works extremely well at a high level in the UFC. That's very impressive. Like, Cub Swanson is a black belt, and if you looked up at the guillotine that he landed on Swanson, whoo, good luck defending that. Like, when that guy gets around your neck, not a whole lot you're going to be able to do. Extremely high level. You might have the most developed guard in all of MMA. I don't think that's even exaggeration. He's so good off his back. Before that, he picked up a third round guillotine over Renato Moicano. And before that, he knocked out Clay Guida in the third round with a knee. In a fight that he might have lost if it goes to the scorecards, I'm not positive. It was a pretty close fight. Like, it was closely contested, but I thought Guida was getting the better of him. And then, man, that third round magic for Ortega. He let it loose. I think he's got 4 finishes or 5 finishes in the third round or some shit like that. Something crazy. He's an animal, man. He's 13-0. He's never lost. That undefeated always looks good when you're trying to sell a card, right? But he's fighting Frankie Edgar, who is one of the more underappreciated featherweights in UFC history, I think. I mean, you're talking about a guy who won the belt at 155. Dana White wanted him to move down, and he's kind of small for 145. Like, he's not a big 145er. He's got 5 losses in his career. 1's to Gray Maynard, 2 are to Aldo, and 2 are to Benson Henderson. And it just sucks for Edgar that Aldo was the champ, right? Like, because I think that for whatever reason, Aldo was just Frankie Edgar's kryptonite. Like, I think they could fight 10 times, and Frankie might win one if he gets lucky, but Aldo is just so good at defending takedowns and stuffing all the things that Frankie's good at. Aldo's, like, built to beat Frankie Edgar. That's what you know what I mean? It's just the way it goes. But lately, Frankie's been looking good. He just knocked off a very promising prospect, Yair Rodriguez. He second-round TKO. It was a doctor stoppage, but, I mean, he swelled his eye up really bad. One thing that did make me nervous in that fight, though, is Frankie's a guy who he's got really good boxing, right? He's got clean boxing, throws his combos together well, but he leans on his wrestling a lot. And I don't know if you want to do that against Ortega, because some of the scrambles that they were getting into, there were a couple times where Frankie was in trouble against Yair Rodriguez, and Frankie was able to escape, but I don't know if he puts himself in those same situations against Ortega if he'll get away. Frankie's game plan when he fights Ortega might be to keep it on the feet. I don't know. It scared me too, because Frankie, a lot of this is knowing who you're fighting too. Like, maybe they were like, hey, I bet this kid's not as good as me on the ground, and even if he puts me in trouble, I'll be able to get out of it. You know what I mean? That might have been part of the game plan in their camp. But he was content to work from the guard when he fought Yair. That makes me nervous. But again, I mean, he probably doesn't have the same game plan when he's going in to fight Ortega, right? He knows how dangerous he is off his back, but we'll see. Before that, he picked up a unanimous decision win over Jeremy Stevens. And before that, lost unanimous decision to Jose Aldo at UFC 200. It's been a little bit since Frankie's fought. It's been since May of last year. So when Holloway fell off the card, I was like, Frankie's got to take a fight because he needs to stay active. Like, he needs to get a fight under his belt. Ortega's not an easy guy to beat, though. And, man, I'm taking Frankie. It's hard for me to pick against him. He went to Clarion, which is where I graduated college from. Qualified for nationals all 4 years that he wrestled there. And he's an animal. And like I said, one of the more underappreciated guys that have fought in the UFC. He's just next level. And the things that, especially when you look at his toughness and like the damage that he sustained in the first round when he fought Gray Maynard, like the way he recovered when he came out in the second, like his heart and his tenacity, he's just a lot of reasons to like Frankie Edgar. And I think he's going to be able to pull it off against Ortega. I also like the fact that Frankie was preparing for a 5-round fight, and I think this is going to be a 3-rounder now. This isn't for an interim belt or anything. So he's been ready. I mean, Frankie's in shape all the time, right? Like, if you watch him in the 5th round, he looks like he just started the fight. But I think that's going to help him a little bit as far as being able to put a pace on Ortega that Ortega won't be able to keep up with. Ortega has good cardio too, though. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying Frankie's he's in the upper echelon of cardio freaks, right? I'm going Frankie by decision. I don't think he'll be able to finish Ortega. I don't think he'll knock him out. I think it'll be a grindy, kind of gritty win. He might keep it on the feet. Don't be surprised if Frankie doesn't want to go to the ground and get mixed up in fucking Ortega's guard. I don't think anybody wants to do that at 145. Maybe he will, though. I mean, Frankie's a high-level wrestler. If he can take him down, he might be able to beat up on him. I don't know. I think Frankie will outbox him a little bit and walk away with a decision win. All right, let's move on to the headliner. Chris Cyborg versus Yuna Kunitskaya. What do you want me to do here, Pick Kunitskaya. She's, 10-3, Invicta champ, but she's got a loss to Tanya Evinger on her record, who Cyborg just dominated. MMA math doesn't always work like that, right? Just because you beat someone doesn't mean that, just because Cyborg beat Evinger doesn't mean Cyborg's going to beat Kunitskaya, but Cyborg is a killer, and she's probably the greatest female fighter that we've ever seen enter the octagon. Last 3 fights against Holly Holm, Tanya Evinger, and Lena Landsberg. Beat Holly, unanimous decision, win all 5 rounds, but before that, knocked out Evinger and Landsberg. 16 of Cyborg's 19 wins have come via KO, so got an insane amount of power in her hands, and she's fighting, like I said, Kunitskaya, who I wish I had more confidence in her and I could get this fight hyped up and give you a reason that Kunitskaya could win, but I really don't think it's going to happen. I think that this is one of those fights where they threw a girl who's becoming popular in Chris Cyborg onto the card, so they had a title fight headlining and they could continue to sell the pay-per-view. I think this is going to be a breeze. It's going to be a cakewalk for Cyborg. I haven't even looked at the odds, but I'd imagine that they're astronomically stacked in Cyborg's favor. I don't know. I don't know what you want me to say here. I don't think Kunitskaya has a prayer, to be honest. I feel bad saying that, and I don't like to say that about most fights, but Jesus Christ, Cyborg is a different animal, and I don't think she's ready for that. I also don't think that Kunitskaya has a single UFC fight. I think all of her fights so far, her biggest platform that she's fought in is Invicta, which is good. That's a good starting point, but I think you need some UFC experience under your belt too. And to ask her to come in and beat Chris Cyborg in a title bout and headline a pay-per-view event, and I think the weight of the moment is just a little bit too much, in addition to the fact that she's going to get outclassed. Sad, but unfortunately true, I think. Hopefully it's competitive. I'd like to see a good fight, and it would be there's not a lot of risk for Kunitskaya other than taking the loss. Because if you beat Cyborg, you're an instant superstar, right? And people are like, holy fuck, this girl just beat Cyborg. But, good luck. No one's been able to do it except for I think Cyborg lost her debut or something like that in her pro MMA debut, and then ever since then, it's just been on a fucking tear, killing people. All right, let's go through and recap this real quick. I'm taking Vieira by decision. Arlovsky, I think I said 2nd round KO, right? O'Malley, 3rd round KO. Frankie Edgar by decision. And Chris Cyborg by... I guess I didn't even... I'm going to say 3rd round KO. I think she's going to kind of like she did against Devin, just sit back, show you how technical she is, show you that she's better than you, and then she'll really pour it on and knock her out. This up until, I mean, not that the headliner might be a good fight. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't be talking shit, but I think the 4 fights on this card are extremely competitive. Like Vieta Zingano, competitive. Struve Arlovsky, competitive. O'Malley Sukumta, competitive. Edgar Ortega, very competitive. These are 2 high-level guys going. This is a fight on the card I'm most excited for. Cyborg and Kunitskaya, not so much, right? But, all right, that's it. I think I'll do a recap of this next week when the fights have all played out and everything. But until then, I will catch you later. Thank you for listening.